Welcome to another episode of Final Renders. My name is Patrick Ramdial, and in today's episode we're going to be talking about HDR and getting HDR footage out of your Canon DSLR cameras using Magic Lantern. So what is HDR? HDR is basically when the camera will be taking a bright image and a low image and combining them together, so you get an image that has high exposure and low exposure at the same time. Now, there are trade-offs to this. First off, if you're shooting HDR video through your Canon cameras using Magic Lantern like I will be, you cannot shoot at 24 frames a second. You have to shoot at 60 frames a second, but I'll get into more detail.
Hey Patrick.
Yeah?
Where do you download Magic Lantern?
Well, I'm so glad you asked that, Jesse. You can find all the information in the bar below.
Oh, that makes sense.
Oh!
Transition.
So with that being said, let's take my camera outside with Magic Lantern turned on, and let's record some HDR footage.
Once you're outside recording your HDR footage, you want to make sure that you set your HDR video on Magic Lantern turned on like I do so here, and set your correct ISO A and ISO B, so that in one shot you can see the dark shadows, and then the other ISO shot you see the high bright highlights, so that once you're in your computer you can squish both of them together to create your HDR video. And you also want to make sure that you're shooting at 60 frames a second. Because of the way the processing works, it basically shoots at half the frame rate. So let's say you were shooting at 60 frames a second, essentially you would be getting 30 frames per second shots. So now once you have all your clips into your computer, we want to work on moving your clips into the HDR workflow folder that we have here. Let me delete this real quick. Okay. Now the HDR workflow folder is what I will be providing you as a download below. And here you have the 3 shots that we recorded today. So let's open up one, let's have a look at it, and you see that the HDR looks very, very weird. It's basically taking a low ISO reading, and then let's see if we can pause it, the high ISO reading, and what the computer's going to do is merge them both together. So let's drag one of these clips into our HDR footage, HDR workflow folder, and once we drag it in, we rename it to capital RAW, and then we can start the process. Now, before we start the process, you want to make sure that you went into these folders and installed these programs to make sure that the workflow will be smooth and everything's already installed. So if you want, you can pause it, go install those programs, and then come back and resume the video. So once you basically install all the programs, you want to come here to where it says main, which is a Windows command script. Once you click this, a whole bunch of windows will pop up. Now what the computer is doing is separating the high ISO shots and the dark ISO shots and putting them into this folder, the frames folder, and labeling them A and B. So let's look, for example, A0000 would be the first frame of the video, and it is your high ISO shot. Now we look at the high ISO shot and we do not see any of the clouds, nothing like that, but we do see the detail in the darker part of the image, which would be the leaves. Now if we look at the B001, let's bring this one right here. The detail of the shadow darker part is lost, but since it's a lower ISO, you get to pick up the clouds and the sky in the background. So what HDR will do, it will merge those two images together and will give you a higher quality, better looking shot with a high dynamic range, which is what HDR is essentially doing. So I'm gonna leave it like this for a minute or two while it separates every single frame of the video, and I'll get back to you in a second. So once the computer has finished separating all the A and B frames, you are now left with these A and B frames, and the computer is squishing them all together to create your C frames. Now, let me close this. These are what your A frames look like, and these are what your B frames look like. So you see in the A with the high ISO, you get the detail in the leaves, but in the low ISO, you get the detail in the clouds and the sky. Now, with our Canon cameras, you cannot get both in the same image because of the lower dynamic range that it has. So with HDR high dynamic range, it will take this A shot and B shot and combine them into this one C shot that we have here. So what the computer is doing now is just separating squishing the A and B frames together so you get all the C frames. Now once it is finished, I will come back again and we can continue with the process. So once your computer has finished combining all the A and B frames, you are left with all the C frames in your HDR workflow frames folder. Now what I already did was deleted all my A and B frames after the process, so all I'm left with are the C frames in the HDR workflow frames folder. So let's open up Adobe Premiere and let's import it. Let's go to File, Import, click on the first C frame and check image sequence, so that the editing program knows that all the images are together in one video. Let's press open, and since my settings are different and these settings in Premiere are 24 frames a second, I am going to keep the existing settings, and since it is shot at 720p, I need to scale it, so I'm going to right click, scale to frame size, and we have this. So I'm going to press enter. Once it is finished rendering, we can watch it. So the video finished rendering. Now when we watch it, it is in slow motion. You can't really tell because it is leaves, but it is still at 60 frames a second. So all we have to do now is go to the speed and increase it, double the speed, so it would be 200%. Now what we are left with is a 24 frames per second shot with a high dynamic range. So feel free to edit this as much as you want, and you are done.
With that being said, HDR footage is great for some occasions, and what do I say?
With that being said, HDR is an awesome
Tool
tool
to have in your toolbox. Now, if you like this video, feel free to check out our Facebook page at facebook.com/finalrenders. Check out our YouTube channel, so make sure you subscribe to keep updated with our videos. Instagram. Follow me on Instagram at Patrick Ramdial if you want to like my pictures
and filters.
and my filters.